Now we move on to our next news, to Middle East. Israel's military has intensified bombardments on Gaza City ahead of a planned ground takeover of Gaza City entirely. The deadliest day in a week has left at least 123 Palestinians dead in the past 24 hours, according to Gaza's health ministry. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, echoing U.S. President Donald Trump, suggested Palestinians should be allowed to exit Gaza, remarks that Arab leaders say amount to mass displacement, drawing comparisons to the 1948 Nakba. Airstrikes overnight devastated Zaytun and Shijaya, killing 12 in one home, while tanks destroyed houses in Khan Yunis in central Gaza. Gunfire killed 9 aid seekers and 8 more, including 3 children, died of starvation, bringing hunger-related deaths to 235 people since the war began. Israel disputes those figures. Here's what some of the locals have had to say.
فاحنا نزحنا من الزيتون من كتر القصف من الليل يعني لحتى الآن وما نمناش بالمرة بالليل والقصف على مدار الساعة يعني والقذائف يعني فيش شظايا والبني آدمين والأطفال يعني بصراخ ومش طبيعي.
طلعنا من الزيتون جينا في عزقولة يهددوا في عزقولة هينا راحلين هاي 10 مرة نرحل وأنا سلامتي كبير ومصاب وأنا تعبانة معايا سكر وضغط ومش قادرة أمشي ولا أكل ولا شرب وحالنا زي النيلة معي بكفي تعبنا أولادنا كلها راحت وعماراتنا ودور.
من يسمع صوتي بس ارحمونا كونوا معانا شوفوا ظروفنا ساعدونا احنا بدنا نعيش بس انا رسالة بوصلها للكل بس احنا بدنا نعيش بس ريحونا ريحوا الكبار في السن انا هيني كبيرة في السن شوفوني كيف انا تعبان.
Israel's military has intensified bombardments on Gaza City ahead of a planned ground takeover. The deadliest day in a week has left at least 123 Palestinians dead in the past 24 hours, according to Gaza's health ministry. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, echoing U.S. President Donald Trump, suggested Palestinians should be allowed to exit Gaza, remarks that Arab leaders say amount to mass displacement, drawing comparisons to the 1948 Nakba. Airstrikes overnight devastated Zaytun and Shijaya, killing 12 people in one home, while tanks destroyed houses in Khan Yunis. In central Gaza, gunfire killed 9 aid seekers and 8 more, including 3 children, died of starvation, bringing hunger-related deaths to 235 people since the war began. Israel disputes those figures. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Adrian Calamer. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you, Adrian, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, Prime Minister,
good to see you.
Thank you. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu suggested that Palestinians are allowed to exit. But what does this mean? Where are they allowed to exit? Is there any place that they can go and call it home?
That's a great question. Thank you for having me, Asuma, and good evening to all your viewers. This is what we need to understand, that this is a temporary relocation. Israel has no desire to hold on to Gaza. They originally gave it up back in 2005 because it was really difficult to defend against. And we have to remember, it was an Egyptian territory. It was ceded in the 1973 war to make sure that an invasion didn't happen again. So some of the plans I've seen floated out there, there was a mention about moving civilian population out for a while to South Sudan. I don't see how that's going to work. The one place that made the most sense right from the very beginning, but Egypt and Israel just do not get along, and which is a shame because the Philadelphia crossing, that's supposed to be patrolled by the Egyptians, and that's how a lot of the weapons came in. And if Israel and especially Egypt was serious about the misery and the Palestinian suffering, the Egyptians would say, okay, we're going to help you. We're going to set up a temporary placement here in the Sinai Peninsula away from the fighting, and we're going to protect you, get you the food you need, the medical attention you need, whatever it may be. So that's kind of, where do they go? It's a temporary displacement to get them back in so we don't see more civilians die.
And Adrian, building on your answer, for the temporary movement and the temporary displacement, is there a government that's willing to fund their costs and their living costs and their maybe medical, everything that is to be taken care of while they live somewhere else as refugees?
Yes, another great question, Asuma. My hope is that one, the Arab countries would pitch in, the United Arab Emirates and the Saudis, who have been both mentioned as having a place in a post-war Gaza, but also the international community. All the money that the UN pours into Gaza, which eventually makes its way to Hamas, use that money. Amnesty International, if you're willing to put out money, all the NGOs that are sending money and funneling money into Gaza in the hopes that it gets to the Palestinians, or maybe that they want it to get to Hamas, let them build it. Let them build that city. And I think that you would have multiple countries lining up, as well as organizations, saying this is possibly the best move. Now, the counter argument is that Israel doesn't want a temporary displacement. They want to completely occupy and control Gaza from here on out. And that's just, kind of a false binary narrative there.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. Meanwhile, a senior Hamas official says Israeli forces are carrying out what he called aggressive incursions into Gaza City after Israel's military approved a framework for a new offensive in the territory. Ismail al-Tawabta, a head of Hamas government media office, accused Israel of pursuing a scorched earth policy, destroying civilian property and attempting to impose a new reality by force. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Adrian Kalaman. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you, Adrian, for staying with us. Now, what's your reaction to the Hamas's accusation and your analysis?
Well, Hamas, it seems kind of, I don't know, the fact that they're saying that they're worried about the plight of the civilians in the humanitarian crisis, it seems rather duplicitous, because we have to remember who started all this and then who's also weaponizing the aid coming into that area, into the Gaza Strip. Now, with the final assault on Gaza, we have to remember that this is, Hamas is an organization that has built a massive underground tunnel system. And, generally a rule of thumb is you can't win a war from the air. You have to have boots on the ground, and you have to take area, control it, hold it. So when you look at what Israel is doing right now, there's basically two phases that I predict happening. One is the assault on Rafah City, on Gaza City. And that is because that's one of the main strongholds still there. You have and it will be a full urban assault on Gaza City, but you have the senior leadership, you have the most intact and well-equipped units of Hamas still there. So there's going to be a drive there to try and, basically destabilize, cripple, and make it so Hamas cannot operate. In conjunction with that, there's a plan by the Israelis to evacuate roughly 1 million civilians into central zones of Gaza, away from the conflict and along the shore. Now, the Israelis' hope is that, again, this will break the back of Hamas and finally put an end to the rule. But if that does not happen, there's a second contingency plan, as I said, with 75% of the strip already held by the Israelis. Taking Gaza City would add another roughly 10%. That pushes up to 85%. And then the question is, okay, what do we do from here? If it does go to this next stage, I would expect Hamas to move into Khan Yunis, and the Israelis to do everything in their power to get people away from that area, move them back to the central areas, to the coastal areas, and just make sure that it's Hamas versus the IDF to get the civilians out of the way. So, you know, I understand the Hamas leader's concerns. He's worried that they're going to completely lose control. And